If you walk into a modern supermarket at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, you are looking at an optical illusion. Thousands of brightly lit aisles, towering pyramids of imported produce, rows of refrigerated protein, and endlessly stacked boxes give the overwhelming impression of staggering abundance. It feels infinite. It feels permanent. It feels like a fundamental law of physics that whatever you need will be waiting on that shelf tomorrow morning. It isn't. What you are actually looking at is not a warehouse. It is a real-time terminal on a conveyor belt that spans 11,000 miles, sustained entirely by an intricate razor-thin logistics model known as just-in-time delivery. Under this system, retail corporations deliberately eliminated regional storage facilities to cut overhead. They don't store backstock anymore. They don't keep weeks of food in the darkroom behind the double doors. The store's entire inventory is sitting on the sales floor right in front of you. The arithmetic of that model is terrifyingly simple. The average grocery store in North America and Western Europe carries roughly 3 days, 72 hours, of food for its surrounding zip code under normal, calm, routine consumer purchasing behavior. Not 3 weeks, not 3 months, 72 hours. If the diesel trucks that restock those stores stop moving for 48 hours, the shelves empty. If they stop moving for 96 hours, civil order in urban centres evaporates. Most households live permanently 3 to 5 days away from literal starvation, operating on the implicit, unexamined belief that the machine will simply never stall. Here is the paradox. The people who build, program, and monitor that machine know better than anyone how close it operates to total mechanical failure. Starting in late 2025, an unmistakable shift began occurring among a very specific demographic: logistics operations managers, maritime freight dispatchers, grain procurement directors, and agricultural risk analysts. These are not apocalyptic fringe preppers. They aren't digging underground concrete bunkers, buying military surplus, or hoarding tactical gear. They are corporate engineers who spend their entire lives staring at real-time telemetry from global supply chains. And late last year, hundreds of them quietly began assembling a precise 15-item food baseline in their own homes. No panic buying, no chaotic sweeps of store aisles, just a calculated, cold-eyed acquisition of 15 specific staples engineered to survive systemic failure. Among those 15 items is one ordinary, low-cost product sitting on the middle shelf of practically every grocery store in the country right now. Most shoppers walk past it every single day without giving it a second thought. Yet supply chain professionals treat it as an indispensable operational asset. The reason why involves a critical vulnerability in human biology and food chemistry that standard emergency advice completely ignores. To understand why these insiders are quietly securing their own supply lines, you have to look at what has happened to the global food grid over the last 36 months. We have entered an era where the historical safety margins built into agriculture and shipping have been completely consumed. The Black Sea agricultural corridor remains volatile. Primary grain belts in North America have experienced compounding multi-year droughts. Avian influenza outbreaks have repeatedly wiped out commercial flock reserves, gutting the system's redundancy. Crucial maritime choke points like the Panama Canal and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait are facing concurrent throughput restrictions, forcing global freight into longer, costlier, and far more fragile transit loops. The global food grid no longer has buffer capacity. It is running hot, dry, and hyper-optimized for profit at the expense of resilience. When a system operates at 99% capacity, a tiny shock doesn't cause a minor delay. It causes a cascading systemic lockup. When that lockup occurs, whether driven by a regional cyber attack on freight routing systems, a sudden fuel distribution crisis, or a localized weather catastrophe, the public response is always instant, aggressive panic. Canned goods vanish in hours. The grain aisle is wiped clean before sunset. The buyers who scramble in those first 36 hours find empty shelves, locked doors, and zero options. The 15 items selected by supply chain insiders were not chosen at random. They were selected according to strict, non-negotiable criteria: caloric density, storage stability measured in years rather than months, zero reliance on active refrigeration, metabolic necessity, and psychological utility under prolonged high-stress conditions. If you understand these 15 items and the specific mechanisms behind them, you stop relying on an invisible supply chain that was never designed to protect you in a crisis. You transition from a passive consumer exposed to catastrophic vulnerability to someone with absolute, quietly established operational security. We are counting down all 15 items step by step, dissecting the exact logistics, storage parameters, and biological realities behind each one. Starting right now with number 15, cooking oil. The structural fragility of the modern retail food system is not an accidental oversight of history, but the intended consequence of strategic economic decisions made over the past half-century. To comprehend how a modern metropolitan population can be brought within 72 hours of severe food insecurity, one must examine the systematic removal of supply chain buffers that previously protected domestic markets. Throughout the mid-20th century, national agricultural policy in North America and Western Europe prioritized reserve accumulation. Governments maintained massive physical stockpiles of grain, butter, milk powder, and canned legumes in decentralized regional storage facilities. These strategic reserves functioned as economic shock absorbers, designed to stabilize domestic prices during bad harvests and ensure uninterrupted food distribution during wartime emergencies or civil infrastructure disruptions. This model began to shift dramatically during the late 1970s and 1980s. Federal deregulation, combined with the rise of institutional retail conglomerates, transformed the financial priorities of the food sector. Managing large physical inventories required capital outlay, real estate investment, climate-controlled warehousing, and ongoing maintenance costs that yielded low profit margins. Corporate executives and logistics consultants recognized that holding stock was an inefficiency on financial balance sheets. The breakthrough came with the adoption of Japanese lean manufacturing principles, specifically the just-in-time inventory management protocol popularized by the automotive sector. When applied to food distribution, just-in-time replaced physical inventory with predictive algorithms and rapid transportation. Storage facilities were dismantled or sold off to real estate developers. Retail corporations shifted to a model where products move continuously from farm to processing plant, from processing plant to regional cross-dock distribution hubs, and directly onto grocery store shelves within hours of delivery. On paper, this shift was a financial triumph. Capital efficiency skyrocketed, food waste within retail facilities dropped, and consumer prices declined for decades. However, it created a geographical and operational trap of unprecedented scale. By eliminating physical reserves, the retail food industry traded resilience for hyper-efficiency. Today, the entire food supply mechanism relies on the continuous, uninterrupted operation of three distinct infrastructural pillars: Class 1 freight rail networks, interstate commercial trucking fleets, and digital automated procurement systems. A single large supermarket processes between 15,000 and 30,000 individual SKUs per day. The ordering of these items is controlled by automated software programs that analyze point-of-sale data in real time, automatically triggering restock orders based on predictable historical buying patterns. This creates an immediate mathematical vulnerability. The automated procurement algorithms are programmed exclusively for steady-state conditions. They do not account for sudden, non-linear surges in consumer demand. If a local or national event prompts 10% of a neighborhood population to double their weekly grocery purchases, the automated order system cannot adapt instantly. The local store inventory is exhausted in hours, and the cross-dock distribution centers, which hold only 24 to 48 hours of floating inventory, are stripped clean almost immediately. Furthermore, the physical transport of food is bounded by severe geographic constraints. In North America, over 70% of all agricultural tonnage is moved by commercial diesel trucks. The national fleet operates under strict regulatory constraints, including mandatory electronic logging devices that enforce driver hours of service rules, alongside chronic labor shortages that have left tens of thousands of long-haul routes understaffed. The average distance between where food is grown or processed and where it is consumed in Western nations currently ranges between 1,200 and 1,500 miles. This geographic gap means that urban centers are entirely dependent on long-distance energy networks. A major metropolitan area like London, New York, or Los Angeles does not possess an agricultural hinterland capable of sustaining its population if regional transport breaks down. The immediate perimeter surrounding modern cities is dominated by suburban sprawl and industrial real estate, not high-yield crop acreage or livestock production. The economic pressure on basic staples has further compounded this exposure. Over the past decade, major food manufacturers and grocery chains have systematically reduced the shelf footprint dedicated to low-margin basic staples like flour, dry beans, bulk rice, and rolled oats. High-margin processed foods, frozen meals, and specialized consumer goods generate significantly higher revenue per square foot of shelf space. As a result, the physical quantity of dense, long-term caloric staples held on retail store floors is at a historic low. Recent history demonstrates how quickly these underlying structural conditions manifest as operational failures. During the severe weather events of recent years, combined with localized labor strikes and fuel price spikes, regional distribution nodes experienced near-total paralyses within 24 hours. When major transport corridors are blocked or regional power grids fail, the digital communication networks connecting retail registers to distribution software go offline. Without continuous automated ordering, the replenishment process halts completely, even if physical stocks exist in distant manufacturing plants. The geographic trap is fully closed by the reality of household storage capacity. Urban residential architecture has evolved towards smaller living footprints with minimal dedicated storage space. Modern apartments and townhomes are built without pantries, cellars, or cold storage rooms that were standard features of domestic design prior to the mid-20th century. Consequently, consumer behavior has adapted to rely on the grocery store as an external, on-demand pantry, visiting facilities multiple times per week to purchase fresh or immediate-use items. When an external shock destabilizes this delicate equilibrium, the entire population attempts to shift from an on-demand consumption model back to a stored reserve model simultaneously. Because neither the retail stores nor the households possess physical reserves, the system experiences a structural collapse. The supply line does not slowly degrade, it breaks instantly at the retail node. Understanding this historical trajectory and geographic reality is essential. The 15 items identified by logistical experts are not merely personal preferences. They are strategic countermeasures engineered to bypass every point of failure within this hyper-optimized, highly vulnerable supply apparatus. While public awareness remains focused on superficial retail price fluctuations, a far more severe structural conflict is unfolding across the operational machinery of global food production. The convergence of corporate consolidation, severe groundwater depletion, regulatory gridlock, and escalating cyber vulnerabilities has pushed the agricultural sector into a critical state that industry analysts describe as structurally unsustainable. At the center of this systemic strain is the unprecedented concentration of corporate control over core agricultural inputs. Today, 4 transnational conglomerates control over 70% of the global grain trade, while 4 chemical corporations dictate over 60% of the world's commercial seed market. This oligopolistic structure has effectively stripped regional farmers of operational autonomy. To maintain yield margins amid volatile climate conditions, agricultural producers are forced to rely on proprietary seed varieties, synthetic nitrogen fertilizers, and specialized chemical pesticides produced by a handful of corporate entities. When international supply channels for raw chemical inputs experience volatility, such as recent export restrictions on phosphate and potash, the financial shock cascades directly onto domestic farms. Across North America and Western Europe, fertilizer input costs escalated rapidly, driving agricultural debt to record levels and forcing thousands of independent farming operations into liquidation or corporate buyout. This ongoing consolidation further narrows the genetic diversity of primary staple crops, leaving national grain yields acutely vulnerable to single-point biological or climatic failures. Simultaneously, a bitter conflict over vital water resources is escalating between agribusiness conglomerates, state environmental authorities, and municipal water districts. Nowhere is this clash more pronounced than in California's Central Valley, an agricultural zone responsible for producing over 1/3 of North America's fresh vegetables and 2/3 of its cultivated fruits and nuts. Decades of intensive industrial irrigation have resulted in catastrophic groundwater depletion, causing regional land subsidence where the soil surface physically drops by several inches annually. Under state groundwater sustainability legislation, regional irrigation districts face mandatory pumping reductions ranging between 10 and 50%. This regulatory pressure has sparked an intense economic war between high-yield annual food staples and high-margin perennial export crops. Large agribusiness corporations have systematically prioritized perennial nut orchards, which require continuous, non-negotiable year-round watering, thereby absorbing the majority of remaining surface water allocations. Consequently, acreage dedicated to essential canned staples, most notably processing tomatoes, sweet corn, and green beans, has steadily contracted. This shift has triggered substantial price increases for processed tomato products and basic canned goods, while domestic shelf reserves of canned produce have fallen to 30-year lows. Beyond physical resource constraints, the digital infrastructure governing modern food logistics has emerged as a major national security target. Reports from the Food and Agriculture Information Sharing and Analysis Center document a dramatic escalation in ransomware attacks targeting agricultural logistics platforms, grain elevator cooperatives, and primary food processing facilities. Criminal syndicates have targeted automated enterprise resource planning systems and managed file transfer software operating within major distribution networks. Food and Ag ISACIN documented operational disruptions. Malware attacks froze automated dispatch systems across major regional distribution centers. These incidents stranded thousands of commercial transport trucks and led to the spoilage of massive volumes of refrigerated protein before manual override procedures could be established. Because modern logistics functions on real-time data synchronization, a digital disruption at a single major freight dispatch network instantly halts food movement across multiple state boundaries. This digital risk intersects directly with persistent biological crises in the livestock and poultry sectors. Since 2023, recurring outbreaks of highly pathogenic avian influenza have forced the destruction of tens of millions of commercial birds across major production facilities. While public attention focused primarily on retail egg prices, the secondary impact severely affected commercial food processing. Declining raw poultry yields forced industrial canning plants to operate significantly below capacity, creating sustained shortages in long shelf-life canned meat products. Federal agencies attempted to offset the shortfall by altering import quotas, but the reserve buffer across domestic protein processing remains critically diminished. The cumulative result of these compounding pressures is a food system operating with zero structural redundancy. Federal regulators, state water boards, corporate monopolies, and logistics networks remain locked in institutional paralysis, transferring the risks and costs directly onto the public. The system continues to function, but its failure tolerances have been completely consumed.